So yesterday I made a video about the Los Angeles Lakers and how I feel they have a pretty bright future in the NBA. So I figure, why not talk about the 76ers as well? They had the number 1 overall pick. They selected Ben Simmons, who seems to be an all-time talent and a guy that you should build your team around because he's 6'10", with point guard abilities, but he also has the physical nature to attack the basket and get to the free throw line, put up some points in the NBA. And once again, his ability as a passer at his height seems really special. You know, his ability to handle the ball and all things like that. And so when you have a guy like Simmons, if he really is that good, you have to cater the roster to that guy, of course. And if we look at the roster that the 76ers have at the moment, I don't know if all of their guys really fit in with Simmons. And if we look at their big men, I mean, first there's Jahlil Okafor, who, I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Okafor. I recognize that he is supremely gifted when it comes to scoring in the low post, and if we fast forward a couple years, he might be the best guy in the NBA in that category. But I don't know if Ben Simmons and Jahlil Okafor's games really complement each other too well, because when you have a guy like Simmons, you want him driving inside, and you want him in pick and rolls and beating guys off of the dribble and going towards the basket, which means you want as much room in the paint as possible for him to attack, and you want him to be able to kick out to guys when the defense commits to him. And Okafor, given that he can only score around the basket at the moment, he might just get in Ben Simmons' way. And if Simmons really is as good as they say he is, that's just not okay. I mean, the roster needs to complement him if he's really the guy who's good enough to lead you to a championship. Now, I'm not saying Okafor can't grow into someone who can play off of Simmons. I mean, if over the next few seasons he develops a 15-footer and becomes maybe a bit more athletic by losing weight and can be a player who can play in the pick and roll with Simmons, maybe, but at the same time, that would be asking Okafor to do a lot, to the point where it might just be worth it to trade him for someone who can help you out right now. But also with Okafor, he's not a defensive player, to the point where, personally, I probably wouldn't even take him on my roster, because, I mean, you got to be able to play defense in the NBA. It's pretty point blank, and if you can't do it, you know, I'd rather have someone who can than take on someone who may never grow into that good of a defensive player. But not only that, when we look at some of Philadelphia's other big men, there's Noel, who's already a fantastic defensive player, and only his second season in the NBA. We fast forward a few more years, he could be one of the best defenders in the league for a long time. But also, his potential as a pick-and-roll player next to Ben Simmons, the potential may be a lot higher because Noel is super athletic. He can already catch alley-oops. I mean, if you see any random highlights of him getting alley-oops from Ish Smith, I mean, just imagine that coming from Ben Simmons, who's like 6'10". I think the possibilities of Ben Simmons and Noel being a really effective pick-and-roll is pretty damn real with how athletic they are. But not only that, Simmons is going to want to run in the open floor because he's going to grab a lot of rebounds and go coast to coast. Noel can keep up with Simmons because he's one of the more athletic big men in the NBA. So I think Noel probably has more potential to play off of Ben Simmons than Jahlil Okafor does. However, Noel, he really needs to do a lot of work offensively, because if you have two guys in a pick and roll and neither one of them can shoot, because, I mean, Simmons is not expected to be a shooter when he walks into the NBA, and Noel has not been an effective mid-range shooter yet, that could be a real problem because NBA teams could just sag off of you and say, okay, do whatever you want, we're just going to clog the paint. But then if we look at another big man for the Sixers, Joel Embiid, who seems to be kind of like the in-between of Okafor and Noel, because apparently he actually has a bit of a mid-range jumper. Unfortunately, he hasn't played in the NBA in 2 years, but if he can be the sort of athletic big man who can play a pick and roll with Simmons, but at the same time also stretch out the floor to about 15 feet at the center position, that could be the guy who should play off of Simmons because, you know, he's more athletic than Okafor. He seems to be a better defender than Okafor based on what we've seen in college and what scouts will say, but he also has more of an offensive game than Noel. And if that is the case, then I think Simmons and Embiid could be the main two guys for this Sixers team, and then you could look to trade Jahlil Okafor as well as Nerlens Noel and acquire some perimeter players or whatever to really surround Simmons with. Now, there is also Dario Saric, who's coming over from international play to join the Sixers this season. He seems to be a stretch four who can run up and down the floor and match Simmons' athleticism and also be someone he can kick out to. Saric is probably going to be a seamless fit at the power forwards position for Ben Simmons. Now, the question with him is, how good is he going to be defensively? He has had a couple of big block shots in FIBA in the Olympics, so he's got that going for him, but we don't know how consistent of an NBA defender he can be. But my gut feeling would be, if Joel Embiid is really what they say he is, I think he is the right big man to play off of Ben Simmons. If he ends up being a disappointment or his injury regresses him too much, I think Nerlens Noel is your next choice because, Noel can kind of be like the next DeAndre Jordan who, you'll gladly take that on your team, especially with a playmaker like Ben Simmons. And I think Jahlil Okafor is probably the odd man out next to him, unless Okafor can make progress in terms of developing a 15-footer, losing some weight, being actually effective on defense. He's not super athletic next to Simmons. I don't know. I don't really picture a world where Simmons and Okafor can play together, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I do think that you will see at least one of these guys get traded this season, whether it be Okafor, Noel, or Embiid. I don't think the Sixers are going to take too long to really make their decision on who they're going to roll with. There were rumors they were going to trade Noel as well as Okafor in this offseason. I don't think it's going to happen now because they want to see what they really have next to Ben Simmons. But I do think a couple of these guys are going to get moved for some perimeter players, and you could surround Simmons with some shooters, some defenders, and then you're going to have the one center who can really play off of him. Saric will probably be at the 4. And I think Philadelphia will be rolling in the right direction. But as of right now, they got a bit of shuffling to do. But they have a good problem on their hands, which is they have too many good players at one position. But luckily, they're all trade chips. So I think the Sixers have a bright thing going. They just got to move a few pieces, and they'll be all right.